Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Omnichannel for ServiceNow, where you are today and where you can be with 3CLogic and ServiceNow. Your time is valuable, and we're going to try to keep this as close to 30 minutes as possible. So for any questions we can't get to, we'll be sure to send you the answers after the webinar. So I'd like to introduce Guillaume Senav, who goes by G for short, VP of Business Development and Alliances with 3CLogic. Without any further ado, G, take it away.
But to Kathy's point, the goal here is not to go for longer than 30 minutes, if not shorter. But we've got an interesting topic to cover, and I'm excited to kind of explain or at least look at how you can apply an omnichannel experience with ServiceNow. The assumption is that for those of you on the call, you've either invested in ServiceNow as your primary system of record, whether it's for your internal help desk or external customer service teams, but are looking to try and roll in more of that omni-channel experience that weaves together not just the native digital workflows and channels that ServiceNow solves for, like, for example, email or ServiceNow's native chat, but also in relation to any type of voice-related engagements that may occur between you and your customers, obviously voice being one of the primary forms of escalation when digital channels either don't suffice or maybe the issue is too critical to address over those digital channels. Before I dive into any type of live, although short demonstration, I did want to try and set the context in terms of where omnichannel should fit or how we've typically, in our experience, seen it apply in the marketplace. So to do that, step one is to kind of take a look at what are the current challenges today. The reality is, and presumably many of you can relate to this, is most of the omnichannels or omnichannel components are, for all intents and purposes, siloed, and by default, as are the teams that are expected to deliver that single universal client experience. And so the way things typically are arranged might be a little bit different from one organization to the next, but the sort of general themes still typically seem to hold true. Is first and foremost, you've got your engagement channels, otherwise known as your call center, your contact center. Some of you may not necessarily relate with those terms. You might prefer the term help desk or customer service team, whether the employee base or external customers are the audience that you serve. But for all intents and purposes, there are obviously different channels by way of which customers can submit an inquiry. Obviously, you can send in an email into ServiceNow, which could create a ticket or a case or a service request, depending on which ServiceNow module you use. You might try and understand how those different engagements across email and chat and telephony apply reporting analytics, but obviously there's different means by which a customer can presumably interface with your organization and your team. So that's one silo. Of course, where a lot of the information resides regarding your customers or the inquiries or tickets they may be submitting is typically going to be stored in some form of data management system. The example here, of course, being ServiceNow. And then if you're more of a little bit further along than others, you may also be looking to use workforce management or workforce optimization to help optimize the use of your agents or coaching. But all these things typically end up being segmented out into three different buckets, three different platforms, even though there's an enormous amount of information that needs to travel efficiently between each for you to really be able to offer that single customer service journey. So if you look at it from the perspective of, let's just say, the call center world, or maybe just a help desk, whose focus is purely to manage different channels by which consumers may reach out to them. Again, it could be email, could be chat, or for today's purposes, obviously telephony as well, or voice. Typically, what will happen is they'll aggregate everything in this format. You've got your call center platform, the tools to manage your respective agents, but the information that actually helps facilitate your agents in each of the client engagements that they are likely fielding. In other words, the information about the customer and the inquiry that's going to help them solve and resolve that issue typically is then held sort of outside or external to the interface that the agents use. And that's very common in the call center space, and yet still segmented, so inefficient by default. If you look at it from the enterprise point of view, what you find is it's a little bit of the opposite. Enterprise organizations, whether they're managing a help desk to service their employees, could be human resources, could be an IT help desk, or it could be obviously external customers in more of a customer support or customer service capacity, typically will have or will platform on their data management platform, ServiceNow being the example, and try and integrate or bring in the different communication channels. But it's typically a surface level integration between the two. And you can see what happens is what's left sort of to the side is the agent optimization tools, WFM and WFO, because it's not necessarily as core for many. So what ends up happening is if you look at a maturity curve, most customers find themselves here in this bottom left-hand quadrant, right? They've selected a system of record. In the case of enterprise, typically they'll have a bias for a system like ServiceNow as opposed to, for their customer or agents to work from, as opposed to, having their agents work from a call center platform that pulls data in. But they typically don't have the telephony channel integrated, or if they do, it's typically very lightly integrated. So it might be at best a CTI integration, so you can make and receive calls from your platform, but you're not necessarily managing call volume as it relates to the other channels by which customers may be also reaching out to you. Again, email or chat, which in the case of ServiceNow are obviously native functions of the ServiceNow platform. So to get to sort of that transformative stage, really what you want to try and do is universalize all of your channels under a single roof. And for that to happen, for you to really develop or be able to offer an omni-channel experience, at some point, a single system has to be able to make the final decision in terms of how to route customer inquiries across the different channels that might be that the customer might be using in relation to a number of different factors. The priority of that inquiry, regardless of the channel over which it might come through, the availability as well as the capacity of each of the different agents that you have. And for that to be possible, at some point you have to have the ability for ServiceNow to have an understanding of an agent's availability across all three channels, both native to ServiceNow and not, and be able to apply universal or unified queuing in such a way that ServiceNow is not solving for maybe just emails and chats, and then obviously the phone's ringing off to the side independent of everything else happening inside the platform. That's the only way to deliver omni-channel. And what's exciting as a result of ServiceNow's Madrid enhancements, and obviously the future versions to come out in New York and so forth, is they've introduced the concept of agent presence. They've introduced the concept of AWA, or advanced workflow assignment, which actually makes it feasible to merge external channels like voice and complement native channels like what ServiceNow offers today, which is email and chat. So what we're going to go through here real quickly, just to give you an idea of what that might look like potentially in your own environment, is kind of look at, okay, well, if I were to weave in the voice channel and by default solve for the three most common avenues by which a client is most likely to interface with my organization. Again, I could be an employee, I could be an external customer. What we'll look at is how that has an impact on the agent experience. So we'll look at what an integrated CTI would look like, how you might verify a caller, how to merge the channels, all three of them under one roof using ServiceNow AWA. Look at how you can allow an agent to determine or view what was the customer journey a client followed or went through when reaching out to an organization, and then also sort of quickly look at what the administrative experience would look like, because it's not just about the agents, but it's also about it's also a case of how easy to manage these types of solutions, presumably in an easy way. So let me switch screens here. Let me just flip out here. Okay. So what you have here is obviously the new ServiceNow workspace. Depending on whether or not you've already migrated to Madrid, some of you are probably more familiar with this sort of ServiceNow UI. But what we're going to use for today's purposes is the ServiceNow agent workspace. So in this case, I'm solving purely for what would be a day in the life of an agent, and how do I manage not just the native digital channels that ServiceNow has, but also incorporate voice as a complement to those two. So the way to look at that is, first and foremost, 3CLogic has its own integrated CTI inside of ServiceNow. There is a certified application on the ServiceNow store that would allow you to start deploying the 3CLogic solution. And what we've done is, while 3CLogic in this case specifically solves for incoming and outgoing calls, right, the voice channel, what ServiceNow allows within its new Madrid release is the ability to incorporate calls or voice as an extension of the other two digital channels that ServiceNow manages. So you can see in this case, I've logged in to ServiceNow. I'm available to receive ServiceNow chats. I'm available to receive ServiceNow cases or tickets. And then if I mark myself available in 3CLogic, you'll notice in just a second here that all of a sudden ServiceNow is also going to recognize my availability as an agent. Whoops, let me just switch back here. As an agent inside of per calls in relation to the other channels within ServiceNow. So as we have it configured here, and this is all about configuration, as an agent, I could potentially be the recipient of a call, which obviously is an external solution that's being merged and the present state is being made available into ServiceNow, in addition to the native channel that ServiceNow solves for, right? I could receive a case, I could also receive a chat. So what I'll do here is, just for argument's sake, let me actually do an inbound call, right? So I'll take you through sort of the day of the life of a customer calling in. Again, that customer could be an external individual, could be an employee of the company. And I'll go through an IVR, which is the equivalent of a call flow. When I do that, what you'll see is you'll see that the status, when the call comes through, the status will also change within ServiceNow. And the way in which we have it configured is, in the event that I'm on a call, ServiceNow will be notified that I'm on an active call, and by default, will change my availability to receive any additional work across not just the telephony channel, but all the other channels available here. In this case, obviously cases as well as chats. So let me do a quick inbound call, and then I'll give you guys an idea of what that looks like in the background as well. Let me just do an incoming call, put this on speaker.
ServiceNow. You have reached the Enterprise Support Desk. For verification purposes, please input the 7 digits of your account number.
So I'm going to enter a verification code here. Could be something custom in this case, or it could be a phone number, right?
Your account has been verified. If you are calling about an incident, press 1. If you are calling about a case, press 2.
So I'm going to pretend I'm calling about an incident, could be about a case as well.
Incident, press 1.
Let's pretend I have an existing incident.
Please enter your incident number.
And I'm going to enter 55. Right? So the system's collecting this information, it's processing it, it's determining who is the available agent to receive the call. Just so happens to be myself. So when I actually accept the call, I'm going to mute this. What you'll see is that the status inside of ServiceNow has also reflected a change. So I'm active on a call. I could actually click on the interaction record to pull up the record to which this is assigned to. But for the duration of this call, the way in which the rules were written in AWA, ServiceNow's Advanced Workflow Assignment, is that if an agent is active on a call, then I'm no longer eligible to receive any other forms of work. Now, of course, as a result of AWA, it's a really powerful tool because it has that universal view of agent availability, capacity, and not just incoming voice calls, but obviously other forms of channels that are native to ServiceNow. You could mix up the variation. So for example, if I'm on a call, maybe I'm not eligible to receive anything else. But if I'm on a chat, maybe I'm eligible to receive additional chats up to a certain limit. Same thing for emails. So you can start playing with sort of what are the different variations and capacity that an agent could field. In this case, we made it sort of black and white. If I'm on a call, shut off all other additional forms of work. You'll also see that in a true omnichannel state, we're leveraging information that I put into the IVR and querying or authenticating that against information inside of ServiceNow. So the goal here is for ServiceNow to be the main brains of the operation, the main system of record Presumably that's where all the relevant data resides. That's the data you inevitably will want to update at the end of the engagement. But it also allows for us to leverage that information and say, hey, I've already verified this individual. There's no need for you as an agent to verify that information. And in true form, you'll see that, in fact, as I mentioned earlier, you can see what was the customer journey that the customer, in this case myself, went through. So I called in, I pressed 1 because I had an incident, could have been 2 if I had a case. I gave a specific case number, which was case number 55. And under that basis, assuming the system had no need to collect additional information, it went ahead and determined that I happened to be the most eligible agent to receive this call. And you can see that sure enough, if I open up the related task to this interaction, that the ticket number 55 was opened or associated with this incoming interaction, which means that as an agent, I have access to all the relevant information to that incident, including all the previous phone calls and interactions that might have taken place. So the goal here is obviously to solve for the fact that if I'm on a call, to not send me more work. Now what I'm going to do here for just a quick second, I'm going to pause my screen. In the background, I'm actually going to send in let me just send in an email here real quick. And I'm going to send in an email. We'll give it 30 seconds for ServiceNow to receive that email. Let me just bring my screen back up here. So what I've done is while I'm active on a call, obviously I've sent in an email. That email is going to come in the form of a case, right? And I think the email I sent in was I need help with my new BlackBerry or something of that nature. So while we wait for that case to come in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and hang up the call. And of course, you could put in your notes, right? So notes regarding the power of, if I could type, Omnichannel with ServiceNow, right? And you can go ahead and say, okay, well, let me select what was the outcome of this conversation. So let's say when the person called in, it was determined that I was unable to solve their issue. I'm going to go ahead and escalate it. And just before I do that, let me just double check that that case came in. So let me take a look. Yep, so here's this case right here. Need a BlackBerry ordered, okay? Well, actually, that's not the one. There should be a new one because I was testing earlier. Let's make sure it actually came in. Let me just double check here. There should be a new one come in. Okay, so we'll go back to my record. So we'll give it a couple more seconds. So when I finalize this call, you'll notice that in my inbox, there's no work currently presented to me. So there was no additional email or anything or case sent to me. When I finalize and mark myself available, a couple of things are going to happen. It's going to go ahead and store all the information that happened on this call, right? It's going to go to the phone logs. It's going to mark me back in an available state. And you'll notice because all of a sudden, ServiceNow recognized that I've ended the call and I'm now currently available to receive work over any of the channels to which I'm assigned to, which happens to be all 3, that the case that was sitting in the queue waiting to be assigned to an agent automatically populated its way to me now that I'm an eligible individual to receive that type of engagement. Now, of course, you could accept it. It's going to open up a new interaction record, right? So in addition to opening up the new case that's come in, you'll also see if I go back to the interaction record here that I could refresh and let me do that real quick and have access to the incoming call record that came in through here. So you can see here are my notes that just came in. Here's the call recording. Here's the fact that the outcome of the call was escalated, which of course could update ServiceNow. So as an agent, everything's been automated for me. It was determined that I was the one that was eligible to receive this call. Maybe I'm a specialist in BlackBerry. And in the same instance, it also determined I'm also the person that should field the incoming case, but it's not going to present it to me based on the rules set between our platform and ServiceNow's AWA until I've reached a state of availability, right? So don't disturb me with a case so I can devote all my attention to this call. But as soon as that's done, by all means, pass it through, okay? Now, if I switch screens here real quick and go into the administrative experience, what you'll find is how easy it is to manage these types of environments, right? So inside of ServiceNow, and I'm hitting on just a few things here, what you can solve for is build those types of journeys inside of ServiceNow. So in the example, when I called in, the system had asked me or provided me a couple options. It then asked me if I'm calling about an incident or a case. It asked if those are existing or new ones. And by default, the system was able to fetch or post information between the 3CLogic platform and ServiceNow to determine, okay, well, to whom should I route this call? Maybe it's a VIP customer. Maybe the ticket or the case is already assigned to a specific agent. Wouldn't it be great if you could send it to that agent in question? Or perhaps there's nothing unique about that ticket and we want to send it to a general queue. So based on the information that we collect from a customer or employee, again, could be an internal individual as well to the organization, we can leverage ServiceNow data to then determine, okay, who are the eligible agents? But because we're trying to create, or in this case have created, an omni-channel relationship between the voice platform and the digital channels available within ServiceNow, just because a call is waiting in the queue doesn't mean it's going to get transferred until ServiceNow has made the final determination that that call should take precedence, or there's an agent that has the availability or capacity to field that additional form of work. The great thing is now everything, whether a customer has reached out to you over an email channel, over a ServiceNow chat, or obviously in this case over the voice channel, everything is going to be by default stored within ServiceNow. And because that's the case, you now reach a point where you can create custom configurable reports that merge both the voice channel, other channels within ServiceNow as well, and take that data and relate it to the work that's actually being performed within ServiceNow. So an example would be, if I fielded X number of 3CLogic calls, wouldn't it be great if we knew what the distribution of calls was across maybe different incident categories or case categories? So an example here is, for the different categories that you have within within this example, apparently individuals can do general inquiries, they can call about software issues, hardware issues, or network issues. In this example, you can see what is the total distribution of calls across each. In this case, there seems to be a disproportionate number of calls for general inquiries. Maybe upon deeper research, you'll uncover that a lot of them have to do with password resets, something that could very easily be automated using ServiceNow orchestration. Now, obviously, we're solving just for the voice channel, but because the other digital forms or workflows are available, you could presumably also add in, okay, well, let's see how many people solve for inquiries over chat, how many people solve these inquiries over our knowledge base or email channels, and understand what is the distribution of customer inquiries across the different categories. Is there a preference for individuals to call for more complex network use cases, as opposed to maybe chat is more than sufficient for general inquiries? But because everything is merged under one roof, and because ServiceNow plays such a strategic role in managing for all the channels, because we're passing through agent presence as it relates to voice, for it to take that as part of the equation, you can solve for it under one single umbrella. And so omnichannel becomes truly viable from within ServiceNow without having to bring in a separate platform, separate UI, and find your agent swivel chairing between two different platforms, right? So if we sort of recap a few things here, and I'm just switching back to the PowerPoint. Let me make sure I share my screen again. What we're ultimately trying to do at the end of the day is, if you look at 3CLogic, whoops, the goal is to intelligently connect not just or solve for the digital channels, but to connect voice and weave it as part or as a complement to those different avenues by which individuals will most likely reach your organization. I know I've operated across all three as a consumer myself, and the idea is to interconnect all of them so that one doesn't operate independently of the other. And so then you start solving for contextual actions. It becomes a case of configuration over code. You're not spending your time trying to weave two platforms together, but instead you're trying to weave workflows in relation to each other. And that's what's gonna, if you go back to that maturity curve, That's when they're going to allow for you to truly drive a transformative experience for your consumers, because they'll know that regardless of which channel they choose to communicate through, because your agents are operating from a single pane of glass, they're going to be able to offer a higher level of customer service. And administratively, you'll have a visibility from a data and analytics point of view to understand where are the volumes coming from, across what type of channels, what are the typical inquiries that each channel is best to serve under, and then obviously manage to those different or optimize your organization around the information that natively is going to be made available to you. Again, with ServiceNow sort of proving to be that benchmark, that main system of record. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kathy. I think we had a couple questions come through.
Yes. First question is, are there integrations available for third-party voice/chat clients such as Skype or Link to create a unified presence available today or coming soon?
Coming soon, yep, absolutely. So the concept of presence can be agnostic, right? So if I'm, for example, on a call, 3CLogic call, turn off my Skype availability. So absolutely, that is something that is coming. The first step was to obviously offer it as a native function within ServiceNow, because that obviously speaks to the ServiceNow community, but we are not going to limit it to that.
Okay. The second question is, if ServiceNow is the main brains and takes a service outage, will calls not make it to an agent? A corollary to this question, if WA is not functioning properly, it could keep cases, chats, calls, omnichannel may not be passed to an agent.
That's an interesting use case. So there are ways, if you know of an outage, where you can bypass AWA, right? So 3CLogic as a telephony system is not reliant on AWA. For omnichannel management, sure, AWA is part of the equation, and the fact that we're universalizing under ServiceNow is what allows us to weave the voice channel with the ones that ServiceNow offers. But if AWA were to be offline, you could certainly put up an outage message or reroute calls around AWA so they go directly to your agents for that duration. So if you think back to the IVR I showed, there's a lot of, there are additional functionalities within the 3CLogic platform that will allow you to make changes to the customer journey, whether it's because there's an outage within ServiceNow or maybe within the organization, so that you can quickly set expectations and adjust. So yes, that type of situation could occur, but you would have the flexibility to work around it very quickly. And then, of course, reset back to your original settings as soon as AWA comes back online.
Okay, great. Those are all the questions for now.
Great. So just a couple things about 3CLogic. Keep in mind that we are a universal or a global platform with deployments on 4 continents. We happen to be one of the more popular applications on the ServiceNow store. We are certified through Madrid, but that doesn't mean that we haven't already done or have existing integrations for older versions of ServiceNow, for example, London. We are a Silver Technology Partner, and while I spoke to incidents and tickets as the primary example, the same would apply for cases, obviously for ServiceNow CSM, as well as service requests, which are typically HR. So those are all things that we solve for. Kathy?
Great. Well, thanks, G. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to either contact the 3C representative if you've already been in contact with someone prior to our demo today, or you can go ahead and reach out to G directly at his contact info that's on the slide here. And you will also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view this recording today, and you can feel free to share it with your team. So on behalf of 3CLogic and our presenter, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.